So we've got one more week of the NFL regular season. Been a couple weeks, so here I am with an updated 2020 NFL mock draft. I know it's probably exciting stuff, maybe perhaps. I don't know if I really care. But starting to get into the flow of it, and I can't wait until the calendar starts to turn to 2020 because then I can start really getting into draft mode, and well, certainly more into draft mode than unfortunately I was able to get into for 2019. I have done a 2-round mock draft. You can check out all 64 picks in the description box down below and leave me your comments that I may or may not read, as you are always inclined to do. Let's go ahead and talk about this particular mock draft, though. Pick 1 stays unchanged, and it has been clinched in terms of the Bengals being the holders of the number 1 overall pick. And I think right now it would be at least a somewhat sizable upset if Joe Burrow, the quarterback from LSU, didn't end up the number 1 overall choice. Now, that said, I do want to point out we still have months to go in the process. A lot can change. And sometimes just because guys are anointed, that doesn't mean that that anointing oil actually works and they end up being the guy. It sure would feel like an upset if it was a different quarterback or another player other than Joe Burrow at this point, I grant you. But let's see what happens when teams start to dive into Joe Burrow's film a little bit more and study him over the next couple of months. Let's see what the Bengals do in the offseason. There's a lot that could happen. It also could potentially get to a point where you could look at the Bengals as an organization they might like but not love Joe Burrow. Another team could come calling, wanting that number 1 overall pick because they love Joe Burrow. And the Bengals could be looking at a situation where they might want to peel back, get additional picks, maybe take a different quarterback. And that certainly could be a possibility, especially because even if you get that quarterback and even if he's a franchise guy at number 1, the Bengals have a lot of holes and a lot of gaps and a lot of issues that they've got to fix. It's going to take time. So it could definitely be an argument made for that. Pick 2, the Redskins, if they end up holding on to that pick, it would be really, really surprising if it didn't end up being Chase Young, the edge rusher from Ohio State. Feels like one of the best players in this draft, one of the safest players in this draft, like combination of both really high floor and also a very, very high ceiling. He's the type of guy you're looking at right now and you're projecting Pro Bowler, All-Pro, potential future Hall of Famer. It'd be a real shocker if he got past the Redskins at 2, especially if there wasn't an offensive tackle that just wowed their socks off. The Lions at 3 could be a little interesting, especially if they're keeping Matt Patricia, and for reasons that are unbeknownst to me. But assuming they do, you'd have to look at him and think somebody like Derrick Brown from Auburn certainly could be a possibility there because they need an impact player in that defense. And Brown, I think, certainly could be that impact player for them. But they could go a variety of different directions. Like, you look at the Detroit Lions and you say, they're probably not going to move on from Stafford. But are you ever really going to build a championship team around Stafford? And when you look at needs versus the pick that they have, they're in kind of this weird space. I think it ended up with a really, really, really good player, and it just might not make much of a difference. The Giants at 4 with Andrew Thomas, the offensive tackle from Georgia. I start to wonder more and more if Thomas won't end up being the first offensive tackle drafted. Somebody could fall in love with the Wills kid from Alabama. Somebody could fall in love with the Becton kid from Louisville. It wouldn't surprise me, or somebody else like Austin Jackson from USC. It would not surprise me at all if Andrew Thomas, maybe being viewed as a safe pick but not having the same level of upside, ends up falling a little bit down some teams' draft boards. Not a big amount, but a little bit, and ends up not being the first offensive tackle taken. Some of you might look at pick 5 and me having the Dolphins take Epenesa, the edge rusher from Iowa. Well, if you look at it, Burrow's gone. Will they really take a Tua or a Herbert at pick 5? You look at wide receiver. Will they view wide receiver as much of a need with the year that Devontae Parker had? I don't know. They might feel like it's a little bit of duplicity there to add another wide receiver that high. Maybe they feel a guy like Epenesa gives them an edge rusher that they really need on that defense, and with multiple picks, maybe it gives them that opportunity to gamble there. Now, that said, when you talk about this league, I would rather have a potential game-breaking offensive player versus a game-breaking defensive player. if the Dolphins are there at 5 and that's where they end up picking, and there's a game breaker on offense that's available, they need to take them and figure out the rest later. It's just that simple. It would be really curious to see how the Dolphins play this draft, because when you look at this draft right now, based off of how things fell out after Week 16 with 1 week to go in the regular season, they got 3 first-round picks, picks 5, 19, and 25. The concern there for me is you dealt away Minkah for a first-round pick. Minkah was a 11th overall pick. As of right now, that pick from the Steelers is pick 19. You traded away Laramie Tunsil, who was a 13th overall pick, realistically should have been drafted a little higher in 2016, ended up getting picked 25 in return. And I know you've got another first-round pick next year, which adds some value there, but that's not exactly progress. Like, you don't want to be taking guys in the top 13 and a year, 2, 3 down the road be trading them for top 20, top 25 picks. That doesn't feel incredibly productive. So the Dolphins must connect and hit big, hit home runs in this draft, or we're going to be clowning them for a long time to go. Nothing really changes in terms of the overall view of this draft class. Wide receiver group is really strong. The offensive tackle group, especially in the first couple rounds, is really strong. I don't think this is necessarily the best draft to be looking for impact defenders, specifically up front, defensive line, edge rushers. Like, this class is not nearly as good as a previous one we just saw. But you can still find some impact guys there. Running back class has some guys towards the top that could potentially make some impact pretty quickly in the league. So it's an interesting draft class as of right now without me doing a whole bunch of deeper dives into these prospects. You will notice that I had both Tua and Herbert dropping quite a bit. I'm sorry, when it comes to Tua, there's going to be concerns about durability. There's going to be concerns about, was he really helped out that much by all that talent that you had at Alabama? Like, if you look at this, including Tua, my mock draft has 6 Alabama guys going in round 1, 5 Alabama guys going in round 2. Tua didn't win the national title last year, and his team was in even a questionable position before he went down to win it this year. So you look at that, and I think teams are going to have some concerns. And as far as Herbert, he makes some great throws, makes some really bad throws, and he's got, to me, even more durability concerns than with a smaller quarterback like Tua. Like, you'll talk about Tua and his durability, but Herbert's had significant challenges himself staying healthy. And Oregon was in that prime position to potentially have gotten themselves into the college football playoff, and then they kind of choked it away. And, to me, that can be a reflection at the college level of the quarterback. And I just wonder if teams are going to look at Herbert and say to themselves, hey, he might not be that true alpha dog. And if he's not that true alpha dog and we don't have one, do we really want to invest a high first-round pick in him? It's a fair question. Now, as time goes along, I'm sure there's going to be a quarterback that's kind of waiting in the weeds that could surge up a little bit. You could also potentially see need and desperation for quarterback drive up the value of these guys, and as a result, you could see 3 of these quarterbacks taken in the top 7. You could see Miami sit there and take 2 at 5. You could see somebody like the Chargers taking a Herbert or a Jacob Eason or somebody like that at pick 7. Not ruling anything out. We got 4+ months until the draft, so a lot of things can change. But nonetheless, check out my 2-round mock draft and let me know what you think. I'll be back next week with another one because the regular season will be over.